Yes, sir. It is the Devil's Puck Look podcast post-game special live on YouTube. Thank you for everyone who was a little bit patient maybe as we got ourselves up and running following what ends up being an overtime preseason game for your New Jersey Devils, a 3-2 victory. We're going to run down everything as you can see on the right-hand side of your screen. We're going to talk about Holtz. We're going to talk about the young players, but obviously veterans really had their fingerprint all over this game throughout, including Vitek Vanacek in goal, who we will also spend a bit of time discussing as we highlighted in our earlier episode today, just talking about the preseason as a whole, what this team has accomplished and what Vitek has accomplished after a disappointing playoff performance for him. But we start where this one ends, obviously, and that is with the New Jersey Devils 3-2 victory. Goes to overtime after giving up the late goal in regulation. And it pretty much is, I think it's the way you want it to be, right? 3-on-3 hockey, as we know, so wide open ice. Nice job by Dawson Mercer in the defensive zone. Holds off the Flyer player, and as they go to kind of, I think they start to transition into trying to bring on a shift change. It ends up being a very productive play from Mercer, who turns immediately up ice, prevents the change, long shift for the Flyers there, and then he goes ahead and finds the drop-off pass to Eric Haula, who puts that one away. Holla! And the Devils take it down 3-2. So a nice little bow tied on there. And by the way, the other assist on that goal came from Dougie Hamilton. So as we mentioned, right, when you talk about Haula and Mercer and Hamilton, well, that's kind of the way you feel like things should get the bow tied on them there as overtime ends. And the Devils continue to remain undefeated in the preseason. But if you back this one up here, obviously, just at a high level, talk about the team stats and what this Flyers team brought to the table here in a game. Obviously, no Hughes brothers in this one. A lot of different players not available for the Devils. So you take that with a grain of salt. We take preseason wins and losses with a grain of salt. But early in this game, it is noteworthy that the Devils just came in a little bit sluggish, it felt like, in terms of their mentality, in terms of their approach. They were playing a little bit on the back skate to start this one off, and that's okay. You know, it's not a problem when that's the way that it goes. But it took them a minute to get into the game, and then it also took them a minute to kind of round this one out. It's why the Flyers were able to tie this one up. So a little bit sluggish in performance there. And as you said, we're going to talk Holtz here in a second. Hello, Steven. Thank you for coming in on the live show. We're going to get to that comment here. It's a live post-game podcast. So if you guys want to get in the conversation, feel free to shout us out over in the chat. We'll get some of your questions up. Reminder, let's keep it clean because that's what we're about here on the Hockey Podcast Network as well. Not that there's anything wrong with your comments, Steven. You're all good there. But back at the top of this one, originally was going to come in immediately and talk all about Holtz, which we are going to. But Vitek really, I thought, had another excellent performance here in this one. He gives up the late goal, but there were a number of times here throughout this game, and you anticipate it when you're playing some different combinations here and some young players that are not going to be a part of the NHL roster. 31 shots for the Flyers in this one. And I thought Vitek, by and large, did an excellent job throughout. So he's shaken off maybe that bad performance from the playoffs, puts together another good performance here. I overall liked it. One other note that I want to mention before we get into individual performances is also going to be the faceoff. Devils winning 52% of the faceoffs in this game. And if we go back to the box score in this one, what's really noteworthy overall, the player who performed the least favorably inside of the circle was going to be the veteran Tierney, who we don't anticipate being a part of the NHL roster here, at least not from my standpoint. 36% for faceoffs. Wins, 7 losses. But everybody else, even though Thompson had to step in there at one point, he didn't win his. Mercer only had 2. He didn't win his. But 60% clip for Lazar, who we'll talk about today as well. And then also Hischeir, that's really obviously the captain of the Devils, guy you want to see having success here. Wins nearly 59% of his faceoffs. And then how about Haula? He steps in there. No Jack Hughes, so no traditional centers in certain instances here. Different line combinations happening. 9 wins, just 4 losses, almost 70, over 69% there. And 50% for another. Oh, sorry, Bowers there. Nothing doing for him. So really noteworthy when we talk about where we're going to be from a center standpoint, from a face-off standpoint. You don't have McLeod out there as you normally would as well. So a lot of different players getting opportunities to perform in a key area for the New Jersey Devils, and they did a really nice job there as well. The other part that we want to get to from a team standpoint is, once again, when we talk about team penalties, 3 for the New Jersey Devils, 6 penalty minutes in total. And that was certainly an area there. Well, who was it? Tyce Thompson early in this one, right? Center ice, takes the penalty. It looks like he gets there a half a second late. They call it a tripping. It's a knee knock, and that's okay. We're not really worried about it. He bounced back in terms of his performance as well, but good job on the penalty kill from the Devils. And then 22 block shots. Wanted to go ahead and discuss this one as well. 22 block shots. And the reason why I like it is because we're going to highlight guys that performed here in a big way from a defensive standpoint. You're going to have Siegenthaler getting down and dirty on 4 blocks, 2 for Brendan Smith, who we'll talk about a little bit more here as well. So 6 between 2 players that we expect to be obviously in Siegenthaler, key contributor. And then if you're Smith, you're trying to continue and put your best foot forward. He continues to provide, I think, a very standard Smith performance. Some nice moments, some strong play, some smart decision-making, and then some questionables, right? Just sometimes where that puck and that mind of his seems to get away from him a little bit. Also had block shots, by the way, from offensive players like Palat. He had 3 in this one, had 2 for Curtis Lazar as well. And then individual efforts across the board. Bowers, young player there. But veterans, we're listing a lot of the veteran guys, a lot of the experienced players for this Devils team. And that's exactly what you want to see come in here for this team as a whole as we move towards the regular season. Now, little 5 minutes overtime goal. We're all excited. We're all feeling the buzz. Now we narrow our focus. And I am going to go to some notes that I was taking throughout this game as well, just to make sure that I touch on some of the critical pieces when we discuss a player like Alexander Holtz. He's a guy who, again, going back over the course of this offseason, Danny and I, we discussed it, debated it. And ultimately it looked like we said, not only does this organization want to put some support behind him, but they're also making it an opportunity where, hey, this is your moment. So they go ahead, and we already discussed this earlier today too. You can check out the episode where we think about that top line, Jesper Bratt, Jack Hughes getting paired there along with Toffoli, and my goodness, does that look good. But so does the Alexander Holtz with Timo Meier combination, right? This second line now, with Holtz up there on it, really has come together in a pretty impressive way, at least to this point of the preseason. Holtz has done nothing to upset the apple cart in terms of him being able to play at a high level, and arguably him being able to understand what is going to be required of him from an offensive standpoint when you are on a line with Nico Hischier and Timo Meier. In multiple instances throughout this game, especially when you had the forced turnover from Nico behind the net in the offensive zone, Timo comes over and helps dig it out. Yes, it takes a deflection, but this is a moment where Alexander Holtz shows everything that you want from him. Early in the play, after the faceoff loss, you have Holtz sagging back a little bit, right? He's just barely inside of the offensive zone because he needs to be defensively minded here. Timo Meier and Nico Hischier are putting in the grunt work along the boards. He cannot afford to leave his teammates hung out to dry there should a fast break start to happen. But as soon as Nico forces the turnover, as soon as Timo gets his stick on the puck, he immediately, Alexander Holtz, drifts into that offensive zone, drifts towards the open space, and puts himself on the doorstep to be able to put that thing top shelf, right corner, just incredibly confident, incredibly smart, and incredibly aware play from Alexander Holtz. So this is another game where he just cements himself as being a member of the top 2 lines for the New Jersey Devils. And at this point, we will talk about, if you're in on the conversation, welcome into it. We will throw you up here, Steven. Yeah, Holtz scores. I don't think he's all the way there yet. I would question whether or not his game is complete. That's not necessarily what we're saying. But throughout the course of this game, he tracked back defensively. He showed that two-way awareness. He tried to get involved on the boards when necessary. He also did an excellent job keeping heads up hockey and putting that puck across ice on passes. Really did an excellent job there. I don't know what else you could want him to show you in the short term. And I think the question would be here, if you're saying he's not all the way there yet, not all the way there yet, to what extent? That he's not ready to be at the NHL level? I would refute that immediately. That he still has areas of his game to refine? Of course he does. But so does Luke Hughes, right, who didn't play in this game. Like, Luke Hughes is still going to have work to do, as Danny would always want to point out to me. Needs to tighten up, right? Needs to be more aware. Can't take so many big risks. But Alexander Holtz has checked every single box that you want him to here in this preseason. I am ecstatic about him. And we talked about earlier, as I just flash back through my notes here, we talked about how some people were saying, well, Graham Clark has had a great preseason in camp as well. And that's exactly what you want to see. Didn't play in this game, but that he may be able to replace on the second line Alexander Holtz. I don't see how that's possible. And there's a couple of things that I just want to remember here as we work our way through to make sure that I highlight the things that I liked about Alexander Holtz, just in case I'd missed anything. And one of the ones that I wanted to make sure that I noted is actually going to be going into, hopefully I saved it here. Let's take the look. Fitzgerald. Here's an interesting little article here that I want to reference. And this goes all the way back. This is from USA Today. And we're drawing this one up going back on early September. So, and this is referencing, that was really the start of the blueprint where we wanted to go. Fitzgerald explained in an episode of Murphy's Hockey Law podcast, identifying the pillars. How are we going to build around them with the current group we have? Who stays? We identified guys we probably have to move on from. Then go out and find players that can come in and surround our core with winning habits with pedigree. Then continue to build through the draft and player development. My team has done a pretty good job checking those boxes on the things we said we were going to do and sticking to a game plan. I think that's why we're seeing some success on paper and some buzz in the air. And he references, yes, Alexander Holtz as being one of those future pillars for this team. So I bring that up maybe just to say the organization, while they probably were frustrated or frustrated, maybe just disappointed is not even the right word. Just waiting to see Alexander Holtz realize the full scope of his talent, to put those things together on both ends of the ice. Proof in the pudding. Fitzgerald has already spoken on wanting him to, thinking he is, and doing things in this offseason that further tell you Alexander Holtz is one of the core players that the Devils believe they can continue to build around going forward. That is just a reality, right? Is Tyler Toffoli going to be here forever? Of course not. So you have a veteran now that looks absolutely excellent on the top line alongside of Jack Hughes and Jesper Bratt. But where do you go in the future? This is what Alexander Holtz can continue to develop on. So really, really, really loved the play from him tonight. Can't ask him to do anything else from that standpoint. When we talk about some other things that I liked here, it was a very good, and this is just talking to some of the veteran players or the experienced players, and even thinking about a guy like Timo Meier, who we know getting acquired last year. You have this thought about how is he going to cement himself into his role? How is it going to look better as you bring in some other talent and as some of these young players come up as well? He had some really good exchanges here as we go to the notes with Nico Hischier as well. Following the penalty kill, tight quarter passing gave an opportunity there. Pressure on the offensive zone faceoff. Nico disrupts it, and that was the center pass that went to Holtz. And I also like the physical play from Timo Meier as well. Couple of notes here. Timo went down. He was totally fine, but he went down on the 3-on-3 in the overtime. Curtis Lazar, who went hard into the defensive boards behind the goal, he ended up coming right back, as Amanda Steins reported in game, did not miss a shift. So that was another positive. But this is that thing about getting in and out of these games without sustaining any injuries. Gosh, is that the most critical part that we can take away from what the Devils accomplish here, right? Because if you have all these little moments of positivity, but you also have this lurking concern on injuries, as every NHL team does, it can really deflate what has been a very positive preseason for the New Jersey Devils to this point. One other thing that we also obviously want to get to here along the way is going to be the performances of some other young players. Mentioned Tyce Thompson. He turned himself around there, had some nice moments. I thought he did a good job holding up the puck in the offensive zone and a couple of instances there for himself as well. We also need to take a look at one player in Santeri Hatakka. Boy, I got to tell you guys, I have some excitement around him. He has not done me any disservice when we talk about showing the ability, consistently performing, right? He's done that now in enough situations over these last couple of games that we can just start to talk on what does he represent in the big picture here for the New Jersey Devils. Can we get excited about this player as being someone that could certainly maybe fill a particular role for them down the road? And I thought that was the really nice part about this game in particular if we go in and we think about the players that performed here in this one, and let's talk about some veterans like Palat. I thought he did a nice job. Curtis Lazar did a nice job. He's sitting on the doorstep and gets that goal there that effectively goes off his skate. Was mentioned on the broadcast. There were no coach challenges that were going to happen in this one. Maybe they would have reviewed it and maybe it could have been overturned. He didn't use a kicking motion at all. It just plays off of his skate naturally, but in a great position. And I think he represents, going back to last year, the mold of player that you want to bring in, a nice fourth line addition for this Devils team. We mentioned earlier here about Siegenthaler playing well. I thought Dougie Hamilton had a nice game, although we'll talk with Danny coming up on Monday, I think, Monday night. Dan's going to be in after that preseason game as well. And Dougie he just seems to want to kind of get through this preseason, and that's all right. Guys like, though, we didn't get a chance to see players like Luke Hughes, players like Marino, Miller, right? So we don't get a lot of those guys here when we look across this roster. But I thought Palat had a nice game for himself, as I mentioned. I thought Lazar played well. Tierney, it doesn't matter. He's not going to be a part of this. When we think about players beyond that, like moving towards that 20 and 23 maximum player, is one of the Foot brothers going to have an opportunity here? That certainly is going to be interesting. And this is where, so if we play the numbers game for a second, and I know, guys, get your comments in if you want to. I'm happy to chop it up with you. Danny popped in here, by the way. Don't know if he's still in the room. Great signs for Holtz. We have hope it translates to the regular season. Yeah, exactly. That's all you can do, man. Put the best foot forward. But I know that I'm running. I know I'm running hot here. But that's the way it works when you come in on a solo episode after a post game. It's an overtime win. It doesn't really mean anything, but it kind of means everything. It's that kind of vibe for me. We got 20 guys that you can bring, max of 23 with players that won't dress on any given game night. So we know when we think about the top lines that are going to be cemented inside of this, right? So we work our way through and we understand we have the top two lines feel like, at least for right now, they're cemented. Quite frankly, the top three lines with Palat, Haula, and Mercer as well. Now, the Nosek, McLeod, Lazar, I don't know if that's definitely the way that we're going to go here. We'd have to think about other offensive players that maybe can make the cut. Siegs, Hamilton, yes. Hughes and Marino, yes. And then maybe right now we just say Ball and Miller. So if we know that we have our top 12 and then we have our bottom 6, well, that gets you all the way, I can do the hard math, to 18 players. And the reason why I bring that up is who are the guys that we think sneak in here, right? Bastian, I haven't seen in the mix. I mean, it feels weird almost this offseason for a player like Nathan Bastian. Then you get into guys like Graham Clark that players have been talking about positively, fans have been talking about positively. You get into a guy like Simon Nemec, who I don't think, and Doug and Danny and I, have gone back and forth on him. I'd be fine for him to be the guy that's up, but I wouldn't hate if he wasn't. And by the way, I left the goaltenders here as well, so that gets you to the 20. So we're really just talking about 3 players that can be in that mix. If I was sitting here right now, Foot probably can get a nod here, and Danny's brought him up before, so I want to give him full credit on it. And I still am very curious about Nemec right now. And if Devils feel like it's worth carrying him inside of this defensive unit, behind Ball, behind Miller, he's not going to, I don't think they're going to crack any of these, but how do you prefer him? That one I keep noodling around on as we come out of this game as well. So just some thoughts here as we work our way through it. And the reason why I mention them is because Hatakka, for me, has done everything that you could want him to do. And let me round back into form on this. When Timo Meier was brought over from the San Jose Sharks last season, a lot of what Danny and I spoke to was the idea of, you already knew who Timo was. We were all excited when we picked him up. And we knew, and we anticipated, that he would become that much better of a player and more impact player on a quality team, on a team that has championship aspirations right now, like the Devils, as opposed to the San Jose Flyers. And I mentioned that Hatakka is a guy that obviously has had some injury concerns, but he also came over in that deal. And I got to tell you, he played absolutely consistent, clean hockey throughout this game. Now, does that mean that I think, hey, watch out, he's making the roster? No, that's not what it means. But I made the notes here that you had Hatakka did a great job outletting with Smith, Holla was wide open. He can't elevate over the glove on the backside, but Nico and Holtz, who were working well together in that sequence. But Hatakka did a nice job outlet passes. He did a nice job making the right play, making the smart play, did a nice job playing physically. On the last goal there in regulation, I think it was William who actually lost track of the man in front of the net. When we talk about young players or even veteran players that are shifting between AHL and NHL and just represent a safety valve, there's a lot of guys that prove that they're not ready to be there yet. And I really do just wonder, as we work our way through this season and we see players go down with injuries, Hatakka may quickly be rising up the AHL list, the short list of players that you say, yeah, I actually think that he would be one of the guys that you could call up in a pinch. And I make that comparison with Timo coming over because I look at Hatakka now and say, can he be a better player if healthy and staying healthy? Can he be looked at as a more consistent player when he's playing on a better team? When his role is being very specifically identified as limited risk, not making mistakes, and playing productive hockey. And I keep going back to Brendan Smith on this because for every time that he gives you a quality play, he gives you a head scratcher. And I just wonder, as we talked about before, as Lindy Ruff is maybe cementing lineups much more specifically early in the year than we anticipated, that the top line is going to be Bratt, Hughes, Toffoli, we think right now, that Myers, Hischeir, and Holtz is going to be line 2, Palat, Hulla, and Mercer. Okay. Like, we feel like we have this sorted out. Nosek is a player we haven't talked about a lot this preseason. Lazar, are those the answers on the fourth line? Maybe they are. And defensively, we hit those notes too. So how do you open this up anywhere on this roster where you think someone can break through? And I really do think you have to look at that bottom pairing. You have to look at Smith. You have to look at Miller. And if we get to a point where Miller is going to be the guy that you have there on that bottom pairing and Smith is the odd man out, there's going to be a world where you start talking about the Nemiches of the world, right? When you start talking about the Hatakkas of the world. And I'll be very curious to see the early season production from the defensive players. Not about goal scoring, not about assists, but about hits, right? About block shots and about error-free hockey. Because the moment that the veterans show you that they maybe can't perform consistently, and I keep going back to Smith, that's when you're going to see, I think, at least me, speak to the idea that this team should be looking to the young players, giving opportunities for guys to get some development along the way. Gonna one more time here, take a look at anything that I saw here. I will say too, actually, a guy that we didn't talk a lot about, and he's not going to have a role here, but I thought Bowers put together a nice little performance for himself. Again, he goes into the Smith category, shows you some good, shows you some bad. I don't know if anything that he does unto itself is something that opens your eyes with consistency, but I like where his game is, and I think that he can continue to develop and grow in that vein as well. So we'll see. I call that, keeping an eye on that for sure. Outside of that, this was just another great preseason game. I think we hit on everybody that I really wanted to touch on. I'm going to do the quick roll call here and just remind everybody. Holtz absolutely destroyed it. Oh, and the other thing was obviously the power plays as well, right? We talked about those penalty kills that have certainly been effective for this team, continue to be effective for this team throughout the course of the offseason. So I thought that was a nice job for them there as well. If we go back and see if we can pull these up for the preseason here, I don't know if they'll give us these full stats, but if we think about the stats for this team, we're not going to get the good stuff here in terms of getting into the preseason just yet and talking about penalty kills. So we'll round those out to start the week, but those have been things that we want to see be better. And it's hard to judge the power play without some of your key contributors. Obviously, we could argue 3 of your key contributors not being available for this, but the penalty kill was okay at times, a little bit scrambling at times, but ultimately the defense got across the line. And if I wanted to talk about one area to watch for, and again, it's not the complete team, but the moments when the offense isn't fully clicking and in gear, early in the season, I'm really interested to see how the defense holds up. Because tonight was an example where the Devils had to do the thing, and where Vitek had to do the thing that we would say is the question mark, right? Is this going to be a team that can consistently go to the well with Vitek, with Akira, and say, stand on your head? Devils only had 22 shots in this game, right? They were outshot by 9, 31-22. You like the fact that the Devils had 20 hits in this game and that they won the faceoff battle, as we mentioned earlier, right? So that to me is the difference here. The ability and the 22 block shots as well. That's what's required for this team. When the offense is not revved up right out of the gates, you need to be able to rely on defensive consistency, getting in the passing lanes, blocking shots, and then asking Vitek to do what he did tonight. And that's what's going to determine the success, I think, early in the season, especially if we think Alexander Foote is ready to carry it over the regular season, but there could be some hiccups along the way. There could still be, even though we're very excited about it, some growing pains for that top line into Foley, Hughes, and Jesper Bratt, though it doesn't seem like it's going to be a big issue. And even thinking, think about Holtz there with Hischeir and Meier, obviously. Think about the Dawson Mercer. Boy, I tell you, Dawson Mercer, we're not worried about him, but he got absolutely shook on that first goal. They came down there. He was backpedaling on his skates, just did not pick a direction one way or the other, and essentially just collapsed and gave up that early goal for the Flyers. Not a highlight reel moment for Dawson Mercer. But as those things happen, this is what the defense needs to say. Can you answer the bell when called upon with consistency? And when you don't have Marino out there tonight, you obviously don't judge it as cleanly as you normally would when you don't have Ball out there, when you don't have Luke Hughes out there. So you have to take it with the spirit it's intended, but it's something to watch for because the Devils made the decision. We're leaning into being this absolute firehouse of an offensive team. But what happens when you come up against a physical matchup? What happens? Hart is a great example tonight. Hart stood on his head in a lot of instances, right? Holtz couldn't quite elevate one for a goal. I think Nico had the same thing happen. Another opportunity for Lazar in this game. But there were at least a handful of saves that Hart absolutely shut down. This is the one that bothered me too. And Lazar had a good game. But when they get that breakaway, he's got to spread himself out more wide there. Because if you get yourself out wide, then you give yourself the opportunity to make Hart have to pick a side to defend. And instead, he kind of stayed very central, made it an easier opportunity to defend that as well. So, listen, it's just a preseason game, but it's another positive sample size for the Devils. I'll close out on this. I was asked somewhere along the line here by Danny, as he was unable to attend. I think if you watched the earlier episode, you know that Daniel McDonough is at a wedding tonight. He asked, what happened here? Summing up the game, and I did phrase it, by the way, as Mercer got clowned on the first goal, just in case anybody's wondering, and the miscommunications by the defense. But Holtz continues to show dedication to tracking back on defense, played the goal perfectly as Nico and Timo disrupted the puck behind the net. That was a really good moment for him, obviously. And Lazar put himself in the right place on the first goal and has shown why the Devils picked him up. Hatakka had a nice poke away entering the zone, and Smith played mostly solid. So there you go. Those were my bullet points that I sent to Danny. That's the takeaways that I had from this game again, and we'll see how the Devils perform going into Monday night, which will be talked about and discussed in this exact same format by Danny McDonough. He'll take care of that solo. Then we'll be back together for a Wednesday episode, I think it'll be, that we'll break down where this team stands, and then we're counting it down, right? The New Jersey Devils, if I get my ducks in a row here, we got the schedule coming up. Islanders will be on Monday there, preseason, and then this one starts on the 12th. So we are rapidly approaching time to shine here. That one actually, by the way, against Detroit on ESPN Plus. How about that? So there's going to be some opportunities to catch them on some different networks here, which is good news for me. So you can go ahead and make sure you tap into where you can see them, when you can see them. And then we also have on the 20th of October, our live watch party that we'll be doing here, Danny and myself, talking about the Islanders matchup on the road for the Islanders. And that's going to be a part of the Hockey Podcast Network. So make sure that you follow us here on YouTube at Devil's Puck Luck, on social media, TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook at Devil's Puck Luck as well, because that's going to be broadcast in multiple spots on YouTube. So you want to make sure that you see it, if not on our channel, on the network channel as well. Podcast feed, go support that. over on Twitter, at Adam Armbrecht, at Danny the Face, at NJ Devils PL. That is the post-game wrap-up, guys. Honestly, I blacked out. Did you enjoy it? I had a good time. Thank you for everybody that came in on the conversation as well. We'll be back again, continuing to talk all things New Jersey Devils hockey. And listen, let's just be like VTech, man. Steadfast and true. In between the pipes, getting wins for you. We'll see you next time, guys, right here on the Devils Puck Luck Podcast.